Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
The hotel keycard fell from Julia's purse and landed face up on our kitchen counter, glinting under the overhead light like a tiny mirror reflecting all my failures. Room 1847, the Meridian Grand. I picked it up, turned it over in my fingers, and felt something inside me, something I'd kept locked away for 22 years, begin to crack open. My name is Thomas Archer. Tom to my friends, though I'm not sure how many of those I have left. I'm 44 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I had a pretty good life. Beautiful wife, smart daughter about to get married, a decent security consulting business built on 2 decades of military expertise. I was a sniper in Army Special Operations, the kind of guy who could wait in the same position for 72 hours, breathing shallow, heart rate controlled, waiting for the perfect moment to pull a trigger from a mile away. Patience was my specialty. Turns out I'd need every bit of it. Julia came home at 7:30 that evening, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor of our suburban Columbus house. She looked tired, which made sense since she'd supposedly been in back-to-back meetings all day. Her hair was perfect, though. Too perfect for someone who'd been stuck in a conference room since 8 a.m. "Hey," she said, dropping her bag on the counter, right next to where the key card had been. I'd already pocketed it. "Long day?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. 22 years of training teaches you control. Exhausting. The Henderson merger is killing me. She opened the fridge, pulled out a bottle of white wine. "You eat yet?" "Grabbed something." I watched her pour the wine, watched her hand shake just slightly. "How's Julian doing with all that?" Her hand stopped mid-pour. Just for a second. "Julian?" "Julian Cross, your business partner on the Henderson deal. You mentioned him last week." "Oh, right, he's fine. Handling his end." She took a long sip of wine. "I'm going to take a bath." She left the room and I sat there in the kitchen of the house we'd bought 15 years ago, in the neighborhood where we'd raised our daughter, and I felt the scope of my old rifle pressing against my eye socket. Felt the weight of patience, of watching, of waiting for the perfect moment. The perfect moment was coming. I just had to line up the shot. It started 6 weeks earlier, at our daughter Isabel's engagement party. Izzy, that's what we called her, had just turned 20 and gotten engaged to Brandon Lawton, whose father owned half the commercial real estate in Ohio. The party was at the Lawton estate, which wasn't a house so much as a monument to obscene wealth. Marble everything, a fountain in the foyer that probably cost more than my annual income, and enough square footage to house a small village. I'd felt out of place from the moment we arrived. Julia fit right in, laughing with the other corporate wives, her HR director polish gleaming. I stood by the bar, nursing a bourbon, watching my daughter glow with happiness, while her fiancé worked the room like a politician. Brandon Lawton was 23, handsome in that generic wealthy kid way, with perfect teeth and a firm handshake he'd probably learned at some boarding school. He called me Sir and talked about his plans to revolutionize the family business. I smiled and nodded and watched his eyes. In my line of work, you learn to read eyes. Brandon's were cold, calculating, the kind of eyes that saw people as objects, obstacles, or opportunities. But Izzy loved him, and Julia loved the connection to the Latin money, so I kept my mouth shut and drank my bourbon. That's when I first heard the gossip. I'd gone looking for the bathroom, the main floor one was occupied, and ended up in a hallway near what looked like a study. 2 women were talking, their voices carrying through the partially open door. I recognized one voice immediately. Monica Pritchard, one of Julia's closest friends from the gym. "If Julia pulls this off, she'll be set for life," Monica was saying. "Poor Tom is still completely clueless." "You think she'll actually leave him?" The second voice belonged to Stella Chen, another member of Julia's social circle. "Once Izzy's married into the Lawton family?" "Absolutely. Julian's already got the condo picked out. Penthouse, naturally. You should see the photos." My hand tightened around the bourbon glass. "Does Julian's wife know?" Stella asked. Monica laughed. "Please. Catherine knows Julian cheats. She just doesn't know this one's serious. Or that Julia's been funneling money from Tom's business accounts into her own offshore setup. Girl's been planning this for over a year." I set the bourbon down on a nearby table and walked away, my footsteps silent on the plush carpet. Another skill from my military days, moving without being heard. The rest of the party passed in a blur. I smiled, shook hands, congratulated my daughter, and watched my wife work the room. Watched her laugh at some joke from a silver-haired man I later learned was Julian Cross. Watched her touch his arm, lean in close, her body language screaming intimacy to anyone trained to read such things. When we got home that night, Julia went straight to bed claiming exhaustion. I sat in my home office until 3 a.m., staring at the wall, feeling the old combat instincts stirring. The hyper-awareness, the cold calculation, the ability to compartmentalize emotion and focus on the mission. I'd been betrayed before. Afghanistan, 2009. My spotter, a guy I'd trusted with my life, had been feeding intel to the enemy. 3 of our guys died before we figured it out. I'd been the one to put it together, piece by piece, watching patterns, noting inconsistencies. I was good at puzzles, and Julia had just become my new mission. The investigation took 2 weeks. I was methodical, patient, careful. I installed a monitoring app on our shared computer, the one Julia thought I never used. I tracked her phone's GPS history. I hired a private investigator named Rick Dawson, an ex-Marine I'd served with who now ran a small detective agency. Rick was a good guy, built like a fire hydrant, with a sense of humor darker than mine. When I told him what I needed, he just nodded and said, "Brother, I've seen this movie before. It never ends well for the cheaters." The evidence piled up fast. Hotel receipts, text messages, photos. Julie and Julian had been seeing each other for 18 months. They'd taken trips together. She'd told me they were work conferences. They'd had dinners, shows, weekend getaways. The offshore accounts Monica mentioned were real. Julie had been siphoning money from my business for 14 months. Small amounts at first, then larger chunks. Almost $200,000 total. But the worst part was the messages. The things she said about me. "Tom's so boring. Like living with a robot. He hasn't touched me in months. No passion, no fire. Just his stupid routine. Once Izzy's settled, I'm done. Julian and I can finally be together properly. Tom will never see it coming. He's too busy playing soldier in his head." I read every message, studied every photo, built a timeline, a pattern, a complete picture of the betrayal. And I felt nothing. That's what the military trains you for. To disconnect emotion from action, to see the objective clearly without the fog of feeling. But underneath that professional calm, something else was building. Something cold and patient and absolutely ruthless. Rick came by my office on a Tuesday afternoon, dropped a thick folder on my desk. "That's everything," he said. "Enough to bury her in divorce court. You'll get the house, the business, probably alimony from her, if your lawyer's good." "I don't want alimony," I said. "Then what do you want?" I looked at the folder, at the evidence of my wife's betrayal, at the proof that the woman I'd loved for 20 years saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to her happiness. I want her to understand what she's done, really understand it. Rick studied me for a long moment. "Tom, brother, I know that look. That's not a divorce look. That's a mission look. Maybe it is. Just remember, revenge is a dish best served cold, but it's also a dish that can poison you if you're not careful." I smiled. "Rick, I spent 22 years serving cold dishes from a mile away. I think I can handle this." He left and I opened the folder. Inside was everything I needed. Everything except the final piece of the puzzle. The thing that would push me from gathering intelligence to executing the mission. That piece arrived 3 days later in the form of a phone call from the hospital. Izzy had been admitted to the emergency room with a broken wrist, 2 cracked ribs. And bruises covering her arms and back. When I got there, she was sitting on a hospital bed, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. Julia was already there, hovering anxiously. What happened? I demanded. Izzy looked at me, then away. I fell, down the stairs at Brandon's apartment. I looked at Julia, who wouldn't meet my eyes. Then I looked at my daughter, my smart, strong, beautiful daughter, and I saw the truth written in every bruise, every tear, every tremor in her voice. He hit you, I said quietly. Dad, no, he hit you. Izzy started crying. Julia put her arm around her, shot me a warning look. Tom, not now. She's been through enough. I stepped closer, knelt down so I was eye level with my daughter. Izzy, look at me. She did, and I saw the fear there, the shame, the desperate hope that I wouldn't make this worse. You don't have to marry him, I said. You don't owe him anything. You don't owe his family anything. You understand? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm going to fix this, I told her. I promise. Julia grabbed my arm as I stood. Tom, the Latins are important people. We can't just what? I turned to face her. Can't just protect our daughter from an abusive piece of trash? Can't just walk away from money and status? What exactly can't we do, Julia? You're overreacting. Young couples fight. It happens. I stared at my wife, this woman I'd shared 20 years of my life with, and I saw a stranger. Someone who'd put social status and financial security above our daughter's safety. Someone who'd been planning to abandon me while playing the devoted wife. Someone who saw people as means to an end. Get out of my way, I said quietly. Something in my voice made her step back. I kissed Izzy on the forehead, told her I'd be back soon, and walked out of the hospital. In the parking lot, I called Rick. I need surveillance on Brandon Lawton. Everything, where he goes, who he sees, what he does. And I need intel on his father. Business dealings, personal life, everything. Tom, this just became personal, Rick. Are you in or out? A pause, then, I'm in, but Tom? Whatever you're planning, make sure it's something you can live with after. I've lived with a lot of things, Rick. I'll live with this too. I hung up and stood in the parking lot, watching the sun set over Columbus, and I felt the old familiar calm settle over me. The mission calm, the sniper calm. The absolute certainty that I was about to do something necessary, something righteous, something that would hurt. I'd spent 22 years protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Time to add my daughter to that list. And time to show everyone who'd underestimated me exactly what a patient man with specialized skills could do. The Lawton estate had 15 security cameras, 8 motion sensors, and 3 armed guards on rotating shifts. I knew this because I'd spent 5 nights surveilling the property, mapping every detail, timing every pattern. The guards were former cops, competent but lazy, the kind of guys who got comfortable in their routine. Routine was the enemy of security. I'd taught that principle for years. I hit the estate on a Friday night, 2 weeks after Izzy's hospital visit. Brandon was home. I'd confirmed that through Rick's surveillance. His father was at some charity gala downtown. Perfect timing. I went in through the east side, where a decorative wall met a grove of trees, creating a blind spot in the camera coverage. I was dressed in black, face covered, carrying a backpack full of tools and toys. Non-lethal, all of it, but effective. The first guard was smoking by the pool house, his attention on his phone. I came up behind him, put him in a sleeper hold, and had him unconscious in 8 seconds. I zip-tied his hands and feet, gagged him with his own tie, and left him behind a hedge. The second guard was doing a perimeter walk. I waited until he passed my position, then followed him silently. When he stopped to check a door, I tased him. He went down hard. Another zip-tie special, another guard neutralized. The third guard was inside, watching monitors in a security room off the main foyer. This one required finesse. I cut the power to the east wing, a simple breaker flip from an external box, and waited. The guard came out to investigate, flashlight in hand. I was waiting in the dark hallway, and when he passed, I hit him with a tranquilizer dart. Veterinary grade, enough to drop a large dog. He collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. 3 guards down. 0 alarms triggered. Just like old times. I found Brandon in the home theater, watching some action movie on a screen the size of a small car. He didn't hear me enter. Didn't know I was there until I turned on the lights and he spun around squinting. Who are you? I didn't answer. Just walked toward him, watching him scramble off the couch, his face cycling through confusion, fear, and then anger. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my father is? I pulled off my mask. His eyes widened. Mr. Archer, what are you? I hit him. One punch, straight to the gut, hard enough to double him over. He gasped, tried to straighten, and I grabbed him by the collar, slammed him against the wall. You put your hands on my daughter, I said quietly. You broke her wrist, cracked her ribs, made her cry. She's lying. She fell. I swear. I hit him again. This time in the face. A controlled strike that broke his nose. Blood poured down his chin. He screamed and I let him, because there was no one to hear. The guards were out. The estate was empty. It was just him and me and the truth. I'm going to teach you a lesson, I said, about consequences, about what happens when you hurt people who can't defend themselves, about what happens when you think money and status make you untouchable. I spent the next hour
Intimate text intro, another weather information.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
making my point. I didn't kill him. That wasn't the mission. But I made sure he understood fear, made sure he understood pain, made sure he understood that his father's money couldn't protect him from someone who knew how to move in the dark. When I was done, I left him on the floor of his home theater, conscious but broken, and I walked out of the estate the same way I'd come in. The guards were starting to wake up as I cleared the property. They'd find Brandon, they'd call the police, and Brandon would have to explain what happened, would have to admit he'd been beaten in his own home by his fiance's father. Or he'd have to lie. And lies, I was learning, had a way of catching up to people. I drove home, parked in my driveway, and walked into my house at 2 a.m. Julia was asleep. I took a shower, washed away the evidence, and climbed into bed beside my wife. She never stirred, never knew I'd been gone. The next morning, the news broke. Brandon Lawton had been assaulted in his home. 3 security guards had been incapacitated. The police were investigating. The Lawton family was offering a $50,000 reward for information. Julia saw the news and went pale. Oh my God. Tom, Did I what? I asked, sipping my coffee. She stared at me, and I saw her trying to calculate, trying to figure out if her boring, predictable husband was capable of such a thing. I smiled at her, and she looked away. That afternoon, Brandon called off the engagement. Izzy cried, but I could see the relief underneath the tears. She was free, safe, and Brandon had learned a lesson he'd never forget. 1 down, several to go. Julia's affair with Julian Cross had been going on for 18 months, but their plan to destroy me financially had been in motion for over a year. I'd found the evidence, traced the money, mapped the conspiracy. Now it was time to dismantle it, piece by piece. Julian Cross was 41, wealthy from a trust fund and some savvy investments, and arrogant in the way only someone who'd never faced real consequences could be. He drove a vintage Porsche 911, wore custom suits, and lived in a downtown penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and more square footage than most people's houses. He was also cheating on his wife with my wife, while simultaneously cheating on my wife with at least 2 other women. Rick's surveillance had been thorough. I decided to start with the Porsche. It was parked in a private garage beneath Julian's building, secured behind a gate that required a key card. I got in through the maintenance entrance, a simple matter of waiting for a worker to prop the door open for a smoke break, and made my way to Julian's parking spot. The Porsche was beautiful, I had to admit. Cherry red, immaculate condition, probably worth $200,000. Julian loved that car more than he loved most people. I spent 30 minutes with it, poured paint stripper on the hood and roof, superglued the locks, slashed all 4 tires, poured sugar in the gas tank, and left a note under the wiper blade. Real men don't need expensive toys to feel important. Then I went upstairs. Julian's building had decent security, but nothing I couldn't handle. I'd learned from the Lawton estate job, sometimes the best approach was just confidence. I walked in wearing a maintenance uniform Rick had acquired, carrying a toolbox, and nodded at the doorman. He nodded back. People see what they expect to see. Julian's penthouse was on the 23rd floor. I knocked, waited, knocked again. No answer. Perfect. I picked the lock, another skill from my military days, and let myself in. The place was exactly what I'd expected. Modern, expensive, soulless, all glass and steel and designer furniture that looked uncomfortable. I walked through, taking photos, documenting everything. Then, I got to work. I swapped all of Julian's expensive suits for cheap knockoffs I'd bought at a discount store. Same colors, similar styles, but obviously inferior quality. I replaced his expensive scotch with cheap whiskey in the original bottles. I switched his designer shoes for Walmart specials. I even swapped out his fancy coffee beans for generic store brand. In his bedroom, I found a safe. Took me 20 minutes to crack it. Inside were documents, cash, jewelry, and a flash drive. I copied everything, left the originals, and closed the safe. The flash drive was the real treasure. Bank statements, emails, business deals that looked questionable at best, illegal at worst. Julian Cross wasn't just a trust fund baby playing businessman. He was running scams, cheating investors, cooking books, the kind of stuff that would interest the IRS and possibly the FBI. I pocketed the copies and left one more note, this time on his bed. You took something that wasn't yours. Now I'm taking everything that is. Then I left, walking past the doorman with a friendly wave, and disappeared into the city. That night, Julia got a call from Julian. I could hear him screaming through the phone from across the room. Something about his car, his apartment, someone breaking in. Julia tried to calm him down, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She was starting to realize that things were spiraling out of control. Good. Fear was the point. The confrontation came on a Tuesday evening, at a bar downtown where Julia had agreed to meet me. She'd been avoiding me for days, making excuses, staying late at work. But I'd insisted, and she'd finally agreed. She arrived 20 minutes late, her face tight with stress. She sat across from me in the booth, ordered a glass of wine, and waited for me to speak. I know about Julian, I said. Her face went pale. What? I know about the affair. I know about the money you've been taking from my business. I know about the offshore accounts. I know about the plan to leave me once Izzy was married into the Lawton family. I slid a folder across the table. I know everything. She opened the folder, her hands shaking. Inside were printouts of text messages, photos, bank statements, everything. Tom, I can explain. Don't! I held up a hand. I don't want explanations. I don't want apologies. I want you to understand something very clearly. You tried to destroy me. You tried to take everything I've built, everything I've worked for, and you did it while pretending to be my wife, my partner, my friend. I never meant to hurt you. I fell in love with Julian. These things happen. These things happen? I leaned forward. You stole from me, Julia. You lied to me for 18 months. You put our daughter at risk by pushing her toward Brandon because you wanted the social connection. You conspired with your lover to financially ruin me, and you think these things happen is an adequate explanation? She looked away, tears forming in her eyes. What do you want from me? I want you to know that I'm not the man you thought I was. I'm not boring. I'm not predictable. I'm not someone you can just discard when something shinier comes along. I stood up. And I want you to watch what happens when you underestimate a patient man. What does that mean? Tom, what are you going to do? I smiled. You'll see. Oh, and Julia? Everything you just said? I recorded it. I tapped my phone, which had been sitting on the table between us. Thanks for the confession. I walked out of the bar, leaving her sitting there, and I felt a grim satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place. The mission was progressing, and the final phase was about to begin. The fundraising gala was the social event of the season. Julia's company was sponsoring it, and she'd been on the planning committee for months. It was being held at the Grand Ballroom downtown, with 500 guests, live music, and a silent auction. Julia would be there, Julian would be there, and so would everyone who mattered in Columbus high society. Perfect. I'd bought a ticket months ago, back when Julia and I were still pretending to be a happy couple. She'd tried to get me to skip it, claimed I'd be bored, that it wasn't my scene, but I'd insisted. Now I knew why she'd wanted me to stay home. Julian would be there, and she didn't want the awkwardness of her husband and her lover in the same room. Too bad. I was going to make it very awkward. I arrived early, dressed in my best suit, and made my way to the AV booth. The guy running the sound and video was a college kid, probably making minimum wage. I handed him $200 and told him I wanted to add something to the charity presentation slideshow. Just some photos of my wife, I said. It's a surprise. Anniversary thing. He pocketed the money, shrugged, and let me load my flash drive into the system. Just tell me when you want it to play. I'll text you. The gala was everything Julia had promised. Elegant, expensive, boring. I made small talk, drank champagne, and watched my wife work the room. She looked beautiful in a black dress, her hair up, her smile bright. Julian was there too, keeping his distance, but watching her with obvious hunger. Monica and Stella were there, gossiping in a corner. I walked past them, caught a snippet of conversation. Can't believe she's still with Tom. Julian's getting impatient. She's waiting for the right moment. Once the divorce is finalized, she'll be set. I smiled and kept walking. At 8 o'clock, the speeches began. Julia's CEO got up, talked about the company's commitment to charity. Then Julia herself took the stage, talking about community and giving back. She was good at this, polished, professional, convincing. I texted the AV kid, now. The slideshow started. At first, it was exactly what everyone expected. Photos of the charity's work, smiling children, grateful families. Then the images changed. Julia and Julian at a restaurant, holding hands across the table. Julia and Julian at a hotel, kissing in the lobby. Text messages blown up on the massive screen, showing their plans to leave their respective spouses. Bank statements showing the money Julia had stolen from my business accounts. The room went silent. Julia froze on stage, her face white. Julian stood up from his table, started toward the stage, but I was faster. I stepped into his path, and when he tried to push past me, I grabbed his arm and flipped him. He landed in the decorative fountain at the center of the room with a massive splash. The room erupted. People were shouting, cameras were flashing, and Julia was standing on stage, exposed and humiliated, in front of everyone who mattered in her professional and social life. I walked to the stage, took the microphone from her shaking hand, and addressed the crowd. For those who don't know me, I'm Tom Archer, Julia's husband, the man she's been stealing from and lying to for the past 18 months, the man she planned to divorce and destroy as soon as it was convenient. I gestured to the screen. I thought you all should know who you're really dealing with, because apparently I'm not the only one she's been deceiving. I set the microphone down and walked out of the gala, leaving chaos in my wake. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Julia's company fired her within 48 hours. Julian's wife filed for divorce and went public with his affairs, destroying his reputation. Monica and Stella, the friends who'd been complicit in Julia's plans, turned on her, giving interviews about how they'd always suspected something was wrong. The Lawton family, already dealing with the scandal of Brandon's assault and the broken engagement, distanced themselves from Julia and Julian. Brandon himself had left the state, reportedly to attend therapy at some expensive facility. Julia tried calling me, texting me, showing up at my office. I ignored all of it. My lawyer was handling the divorce, and the evidence I'd gathered ensured I'd keep the house, the business, and my dignity. But I wasn't done yet, because 2 days after the gala, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Archer, this is Richard Lawton, Brandon's father. I think we need to talk. We met at his office, a glass tower downtown with a view of the entire city. Lawton was in his 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of face that had been handsome once, but had hardened into something cold and calculating. He offered me a drink. I declined. You've caused me a great deal of trouble, Mr. Archer. Your son caused my daughter a great deal of pain, I replied. Brandon made a mistake. Young men do foolish things. That's no reason to destroy his life. He broke her bones. He made her afraid. And you defended him. Lawton's eyes narrowed. I'm a powerful man, Mr. Archer. I have resources, connections, influence. I could make your life very difficult. You could try. I leaned back in my chair. But here's the thing, Mr. Lawton. I've spent 22 years in situations where powerful men with resources and connections tried to kill me. They all failed. You think you can do better with lawyers and money? I think you're playing a dangerous game. No, I'm finishing one. I stood. Your son will leave my daughter alone. You will leave my family alone, and if you don't, I'll release the information I have about your business dealings, the offshore accounts, the tax evasion, the bribes to city officials. I've been thorough, Mr. Lawton, just like I was with Julian Cross. His face went pale. You're bluffing. I dropped a flash drive on his desk. Check for yourself. That's a copy. I have the originals in a safe place. You come after me or my family, and everything goes to the IRS, the FBI, and every media outlet in Ohio. I walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Lawton, tell your son that if he ever contacts my daughter again, what I did to him in his home theater will seem like a friendly warning. Are we clear? He didn't answer, but I saw the defeat in his eyes. He was beaten, and he knew it. I left his office and walked out into the Columbus sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in months. The final piece fell into place 3 weeks later at the courthouse. Julie and I sat on opposite sides of a conference room, while our lawyers hammered out the divorce settlement. She'd fought at first, tried to claim she deserved half of everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. She'd stolen from me, committed adultery, conspired to defraud me. She had no leverage, in